What's up, you guys? Stoops back again with another video, and today I'm bringing you my BFA 8.15 healer tier list for PvP. I'm getting this question a lot on my stream. Now, if you're interested in checking out my stream, the link will be somewhere down there underneath this little webcam thing here. You can get to know the real me and then also ask me a lot of my, all these questions that people have been asking me recently about changes and things like that. I try and keep my shit kind of PG here on YouTube because you never know who's going to be watching, but on my stream, there's no filters there, and it's a great place to ask me anything that you want to ask me. Now, if you're looking for PvE content, I'll also put some videos down there in the description box below. I know a lot of people have questions about PvE, and there's a lot of great content out there for PvE for World of Warcraft, so I'll refer you to some of those channels if you are looking for PvE healer tier lists. But for today's video, I'm going to be breaking down several healers in different tiers. You can see an S plus tier, an S tier, an A tier, and a B tier. That's how tier lists work. The S plus tier being probably the strongest healer currently, and the S tier, being the second strongest. But in this tier list, there is not too much of a gap between some of the healers. There is one healer I would say that's kind of predominant, and you might be able to guess what that is. Let me know in the comment section below if you can try and figure that out before you watch this video. I'm going to show you a website that you can use to try and get information on a lot of these questions, like what healer is the most predominant, or what enchants to use, what stats to use. I'll show you all of that in this video, so you don't have to go around and ask these questions and be a noob and embarrass yourself if that's what you're worried about. Jumping right into the video, the first healer, or the S plus tier healer, is going to be the Resto Druid. Now, Resto Druids have been, for the past couple months or so, the strongest healer inside of Battle for Azeroth after a lot of changes that happened in the meta. Now, Resto Druids have been nerfed over the past couple months or so, since they were very strong, and then going on to now, they've been nerfed several times in terms of how much healing they're doing, their mana regeneration, their mana efficiency, and then we also saw some recent changes to all healers in regards to like Purge, Cyclone, and Tangling Roots having a reduced mana cost to try to combat these recent mana changes. Now, I did talk about this in a previous video. Maybe a link will be somewhere here where mana was recently changed if you're coming back to the game and healers were ooming much faster, but Blizzard did a good job in trying to correct this, and now it's kind of starting to stabilize. But Resto Druids are still probably the best healer because they're all over the meta right now. They're great in 3v3s and 2v2s. In fact, I'll show you some statistics here to kind of back up what I'm saying. So in the past, I used to refer you guys to arenamate.net, and then I recently switched over to the lootdistrict.com. Now, the cool thing about the lootdistrict.com is it has tons of information, and it's a lot easier to use in terms of the interface, but it has information on several things, not just representation. It has talent choices in terms of what people are using at different ratings, spec overviews in terms of what specs people are playing based on rating, honor talent selections, Azerite traits, what the average choice of Azerite traits are for specific players at specific ratings, gear, races, all that stuff. So when you're asking me these questions, or you're asking people these questions, what stats should I be using as this class, or what Azerite traits are the best, all this information is right here for you, so you can educate yourself and you don't have to ask these questions and look like a noob. Now, we're going to quickly go over to class representation for the Resto Druid, just to back up what I'm saying here, even though it's kind of apparent if you are doing Arena. Now, overall 2v2 class representation, you can see here that we have Resto Druid by far at the top. They are way above every other class and every other healer for that matter. And even in, we go to 3v3s, for example, if I switch over to 3v3s, they're still the top, and then trace closely behind the Holy Paladin. Now, when really breaking down the Resto Druids, one of their greatest strengths is they do not really rely on cooldowns. They have very short, consistent cooldowns like Ironbark, Barkskin, and Swiftmen, but unlike Holy Paladins, Resto Druids do not need these cooldowns to really survive. They can simply rely on their amazing healing output. They still have some of the greatest or strongest healing output in the entire game. They're very disruptive based on their ability to use things like Cyclone and Tangling Roots, Bash, Vortex. I've talked about this in the past, but they can be very disruptive when paired with a class like a Mage or a Warlock or any other caster that has a lot of CC. Adding a Resto Druid onto that makes it very difficult for melee cleaves or melee comps to really do anything or get any offense going. And because of that, we're not seeing as many melee cleaves, and that is where Resto Druid really shines. We're currently in a dampener meta where the games are getting drawn out a lot longer than normal, and healers are having to go for drinks, and because of this, the games just feel like they're taking forever, and we're going into a term called dampening, where healing is reduced. You don't have to worry about that until you get into Arena. But Resto Druids are the king of dampeners, and because of that, we are seeing them all over the place. And the biggest thing I want to talk about for Resto Druids in today's video is they can simply do it all. Because of things like, you know, Feral Affinity and 2v2s, they can be very aggressive and get re-stealths off, or even in 3v3s, if you're playing with like a caster or 2 casters, they're not going to be able to go the Resto Druid as easily. And because of that, you know, the Resto Druid can get re-stealths off very easily and then reopen with rakes and stuns, and make it super difficult for the enemy healer to get anything going, or even the melee DPS or the other casters to get anything going. They also can play things like Guardian Affinity, which is usually the baseline talent for Druids, the base pick for Druids, and they're very tanky, so they're hard to take down. And because of this, Resto Druids are probably the strongest healer because they can do everything. In the past, they only played caster cleaves, and then if they played melee cleaves, they'd like the dampener style healer, and it wasn't the best for these melee cleaves. But because we were in a dampener meta, having a Resto Druid is great because of their healing output, and they can go for drinks much easier when compared to some of the other healers because of that stealth mechanic. They can hop into their, you know, their cat form or their feral form, I should say, and then, you know, re-stealth and get a drink off there in stealth and come out with full mana. Other healers do not have that luxury. Now, one of their weaknesses is they have or are very poor in terms of mana efficiency. They're not the most mana efficient healer when compared to some of the other healers. They do rather quickly, but it's not too much of a weakness because, like I said earlier, they can just go off in stealth and get drinks and rely on their hots to keep their teammates up, and then they can come out of stealth and just instantly pop things like Overgrowth, Swiftman, or Bark Skin because they're all short CDs, and that allows them to stay in the game much more efficiently, or much more effectively, I should say, when compared to some of the other healers. So right now, Resto Druids are still my S+ tier healer. It's not as large of a gap as it was in the past. In 2v2s, they're still probably the best healer. And 3v3s, it's starting to shorten. The gap is starting to shorten, but Resto Druid is still my top pick at this moment for 8.15. Hopping into the S tier, any healer that I do name within the S tier is interchangeable, so do not take it, don't take offense or take it too seriously if I pick the Holy Paladin over a specific healer within this tier. But Holy Paladin has to be one of the strongest healers in 8.15 because of their mana efficiency. Number one, they are most likely the most mana efficient healer right now in the meta. They just never run out of mana depending on how they have to heal or how much damage the enemy team is doing or how they can manage their cooldowns or how well they can manage their cooldowns. They will almost out mana every single healer, so going to or trying to out mana a Holy Paladin is never really a strategy. I would say it's very difficult to do. It does happen, but when compared to like a Resto Druid or a Mistweaver Monk, it's not even close. Holy Paladin is very effective at that. Now, on top of that, Holy Paladins deal great damage for a healer. Recently, they had some new traits being implemented and new traits being used by Holy Paladins. In fact, I'll hop over and show you some of the statistics here and show you what these traits actually do. So really quickly, looking at the class representation for 3v3, you can see Holy Paladin is very close behind the Restoration Druid, and in 2v2s, it's not so close, but it's still close enough to give them that that S tier spot. But when going over to some of the Azerite traits for Paladins and going over to Holy, you can see a lot of players taking advantage of these damage traits that also can kind of be translated to healing as well. So for the tier 4 trait or the outer ring trait, we see people stacking traits like Glimmer of Light. Glimmer of Light will basically put a buff on a target or a debuff in some cases on the target after you Holy Shock that target, and that target will receive or take damage when you Holy Shock. So you can put it on a enemy and then Holy Shock thereafter, and then they will either take bonus damage, or you can put on an ally and then they will receive bonus healing. Now, on top of that, within the inner ring traits, we can see people stacking things like Indomitable Justice. Indomitable Justice is a very powerful trait. I noticed it the other day, and I might play a clip here on the screen or show you something on the screen. With Indomitable Justice, your judgment will deal additional damage when your health percentage exceeds the target. So if you have higher HP than the enemy, you can deal up to a bonus amount of damage, and if you are much lower than the enemy, it acts as an execute. I was hit for a 30k judgment from a Holy Paladin, and with talents like Fist of Justice, which is the predominant choice for Holy Paladins, you're going to be throwing out a lot of judgments throughout the match to lower the cooldown on your Hammer of Justice, so that means a lot of additional damage. I play a Mistweaver Monk primarily. That's my main class that I play in World of Warcraft right now, and I'm always thinking I'm doing a lot of damage. I do have a lot of burst damage, but in terms of consistent or overall damage, I always get out damaged by a Holy Paladin because of how many judgments they're throwing out during the match. Now, the Holy Paladin is amazing at burst healing. You'll notice that when they pop their wings or use things like Divine Favor, one of their healing cooldowns, they're going to heal or top someone almost instantly. You can get someone to low HP and then they can top them. Now, when they run out of their wings, their main healing cooldown, or they don't have Divine Favor up, then they will use some of their defensive CDs like Blessing of Sacrifice or Blessing of Protection. Now with these, they can stall out the game very long, but the problem is with Holy Paladin is when they run out of these cooldowns, they really just fall apart. They run out of, their healing becomes very low, and they don't have anything to really stall out the game any longer, so they really do rely on these cooldowns when compared to some of the other healers. Without cooldowns, a Holy Paladin is very weak, but if you manage them correctly, they can stall out the game for a long time. So it's on the Holy Paladin and, you know, the opposing team with the Holy Paladin to try to manage their cooldowns effectively and use their defensives correctly as a team. But if they mess up somewhere along the line, then it will fall apart for the Holy Paladin. Now, I think a Holy Paladin is a great beginner class. I think the Resto Druid is a little bit more complex, but I think they both have their skill caps. I know some amazing Holy Paladins. One of my friends, Zez, he knows so much more about the Holy Paladin than I do. And when I try and play it, it's a simple class to pick up, but it's definitely difficult when I have to try and figure everything out about the class and all the ins and outs when compared to like the Mistweaver for me, which I feel like the Mistweaver is just a much more simple healer. But the Paladin, the Holy Paladin, a great beginner's choice, a very strong healer at the moment. If you like doing damage, they can start dealing out tons of damage with those damage traits, Indomitable Justice. But, you know, they're just a very cooldown reliant class. So if that's not your style, that might not be a great pick for you, but it's definitely a strong healer in 8.15. Switching over to Mistweaver monks within the S tier, they are right behind Holy Paladins in my opinion, or arguably, you know, one of the best healers in the game right now. Mistweaver monks are very strong at the moment. They were, in the past, they've been known to be one of the healers that are, you know, accompanied with melee cleaves. That is probably still the case. However, Holy Paladins and Resto Druids can do that just fine. Mistweaver monk has always been known to play with things like, you know, warriors and death knights and just big heavy melee cleaves, turbo cleave in the past. That is an enhancement shaman warrior. That comp isn't as strong right now. Melee cleaves in general aren't that strong, but Mistweaver monk is also very good at playing with casters now, double caster cleaves. They have insane healing output, similar to the Resto Druid, but I think it's a much more bursty style healing than Resto Druid. They have short life-saving cooldown, as known as Life Cocoon. Life Cocoon is very strong at the moment with things like Burst of Life. That is a specific Azurite trait that makes a cocoon a shorter CD, making it a 55-second CD, and it heals for a crazy amount after it expires if that target is kind of off and secluded by itself. So Life Cocoon on a short CD right now is making Mistweaver, and it's probably carrying Mistweaver at the moment. They were much stronger in a previous patch, but right now they're still very, very strong because of that short cocoon cooldown and that massive healing output. They also have very strong mobility for a healer, probably the best mobility Resto Druid can kind of keep up, and they're relatively mana efficient when compared to some of the other healers depending on the playstyle. Some healers that play Mistweaver go very fast, but depending on your comp, you can be relatively mana efficient. The one thing I will say though is similar to Resto Druids, because of their mobility, they can sneak off and get drinks, just not as easily as the Resto Druid. Now you're probably wondering, well, Mistweaver sounds really powerful. What's one of their weaknesses? They are probably the easiest healer to die in a single stun. Next to Discipline Priest, but Discipline Priest still can use pain suppression if they're stunned, and they're a little bit more durable. They have more outs, I would say, to getting swapped in a stun. When compared to Mistweaver, if you get caught in a stun as a Mistweaver versus like a Rogue Mage, which is one of the hardest comps to win as a Mistweaver, Rogue Mage X,